satellites, as you heard, to building components for big organizations, to creating our own rocket motors and environmental systems, and to now building the next generation space shuttle. And that's been a journey that's not only been mine, but a lot of good people in my organization and around my organization. I don't know if somebody can put the monitor here on. I got a blank screen on the monitor in front of me. Maybe it's because I'm not supposed to say anything. I don't know. We do 4 things in space. We were one of the first builders of small satellites and the next generation small satellites. We build components for virtually everybody in the industry that makes things go from planetary missions to large satellites. We are now a rocket motor producer. We produce environmental systems that are really cutting edge environmental systems. And as you know, many of you followed this story for a long time. We've taken the vehicle Dream Chaser and now get it to flight. Last year, we had a celebration of our time together, and we realized we've done a pretty lot of fun things. We've gone throughout the solar system. We've been to as far away as Pluto and as close to the sun as you could possibly be, and visited 7 planets with something we did along the way, and that's a really pretty wonderful thing. But really what I wanted to talk to you today about is what it's like to be a space entrepreneur. It isn't what most people think it is. It's a lot scarier. It's a lot crazier. Those of you in the audience who know about this know what it's like. But I wanted to go through and just talk a little bit about what the aspects of it. And I think where it comes from, I got the chance to meet a writer by the name of Isaac Asimov. You guys read any of his books? Yeah. You know, I don't know if you know, he wrote over 500 books in his life. Really the whole robot series, he imagined what robots were going to be like, and as you know, it turned into a number of different movies. But he also wrote a lot of nonfiction books about what it was like to be in science. When I met him and talked to him, this is one of the things he said. I've never forgot it. I was just really young at the time, and he said, if I was in heaven, I want to do exactly what I'm doing right now. And to me, that's the essence of being an entrepreneur. No matter how crazy it gets, no matter how bad it is, you got to love what it is that you do and realize that if you could do anything else, you're doing what you really want to do. And it isn't, you know, we talk about aerospace and all the lectures here is about technical side and all the things we're able to do. And certainly I'm a technologist and I love it. But it's not so much about technology. It's really an art in many ways. And these pictures are actually where I grew up. That's a plane that I learned to fly on, and my grandfather taught me to fly. And he was a pilot from that era, and he really instilled the art of flying into me. So there's a technical part, you have to learn how to fly, but you got to love to fly. And the way he did it was pretty interesting. He wouldn't let me look at any of the instruments. He said you should feel the flying, you should feel the plane, you should feel the speed, you should feel the wind, you should feel the things around you, because that's going to be what it is to fly, to learn how to fly. And I remember that, and I use that today, and it's something, you can learn all the technical, you can learn all the school, but a lot of what you do is an art. A lot of what we do is an art. I would probably say about 1/3 of the work that we do in our company is creative. It's never been done before, and that's what art is, isn't it? You're creating something that's never been done. And this is a fairly famous picture. Most of you guys probably have never seen it. The woman in the back is Eleanor Roosevelt. The man in the front is the gentleman who's responsible for creating effectively what became the Tuskegee Airmen. And during World War II, the military was not integrated. There was not a lot of opportunities for African-American pilots or of any type. Eleanor Roosevelt decided she was going to take this on, and she did it in a really fabulous way. She went to her husband, who happened to be the president. He said, Franklin, I want you to change this. And he said he would do it. He said he'd do it like most husbands. He never got around to doing it. So she decided to take it on her own hands. So she got lost. And you can imagine the first lady getting lost. She went out and found this pilot, and said to him, we're going to make a statement. He said, you're going to fly me to my press conference. And for the first time, she got in the back of the biplane. This is a plane that she's sitting in. He flew into the press conference, making a statement that then led to a change, a really big change. And the change was, she said to herself, I can do something. A lot of people say, why not? Why not go off? Why not do this? Why not make a change? And she actually went off and did it. So she flew into the press conference, landed, and at that point in time, her picture was on every newspaper in the world, that she trusted herself to go do this with this man, and it changed that part of history and became what we now know as the Tuskegee Airmen. This is a really fun picture. I don't know if any of you have ever seen the New Horizons spacecraft. the Pluto spacecraft. This is what it looked like before it left. And the reason I put it up there is that the message here as an entrepreneur, these things don't happen overnight. As much as we like to get instant gratification, sometimes it takes a lot of patience. This mission was conceived 16 years before it actually got to Pluto. And the people that were chosen at the time to go do that mission were chosen intentionally because they were the youngest people around who had enough skill to do that, because they wanted to be there for the entire flight of the mission. And it's pretty wonderful when you do that. You realize at the end of the day that it's really worth waiting for. You get to do something in this industry that few people ever get to experience. And when you go home and you say, when it gets really hard, you go home and you'd be able to say to yourself, you know, it's really interesting. I went to Pluto today. You know, you step back and say that. And how many people can actually say that when you go home? We've landed on Mars 12 times now, and went to Mars 12 times. And one of the neatest missions, I think, in doing that is to understand that you're able to change not only the world, but to do stuff no one has ever done before. And at the core of being an entrepreneur, I think that's what you're trying to do. One of my partners who's in the room, Tom Crabb, started an organization called Orbitech as an entrepreneur 28 years ago, and we're now, 26 years ago, I think, and we're now working together. And what they're doing now is, among many things, but one of the more interesting things, they're helping to grow food in space. The veggie experience that maybe some of you have heard, we were involved in creating the station that made that work and growing the first food in space. And ironically, the first flower in space that happened on Valentine's Day this year. Pretty good timing, Tom. Couldn't have gone any better. About 2 days early, right? But it worked. You know, it's fun to think, well, of course, well, we're going to go somewhere else. We have to eat, and to see the astronauts having a lot of fun. I will say that I have a Russian friend who called me up and he said, you know, Mark, I've seen The Martian, and now I've seen you grow lettuce in space, and I think you're wrong. I think you should grow potatoes. Because there are alternative uses of potatoes. Right. So I thought about that, and I spoke to him again, and I said, you know, Sergey, there are a lot of other green things that can be grown in space, and I'm from Colorado. I'm glad to see you're with me on this one. Tells me something, actually. But in all seriousness, growing food in space is wonderful. It's what we need to do to go somewhere else. But everything we do can have another purpose. What are we doing? We're learning how to grow things with limited water and no direct sunlight. There are a lot of places in this world that could use more food grown in harsh environments. And if you can bring that technology home, what we do in space can change this world. And that simple thing of being able to provide food to people who don't have it, that alone is something that makes it worthwhile to go to space. Anybody know what this is? Yeah, one or two. That's good. That's an age gap group. If you can imagine, you guys are all the smartest people in the room, and we're here trying to figure out how to send a robot to space, to Mars. And we have two of them, Spirit and Opportunity were their names. And the problem was that we didn't know how to land them. And everybody came up with all these great ideas. When you're landing something on another planet, if you use any type of retro rocket, it kicks up all the dust and rocks, and it really destroys the bottom of your spacecraft. It's not a really good thing. So there are probably a dozen ideas of how to get it to space. If you can imagine, here I am pitching all the smartest people in the world, and you said, I'm going to take your billion-dollar rover, I'm going to put it in this really big beach ball kind of looking thing. I'm going to take it, I'm going to throw it out of a spacecraft. It's going to hit Mars. It's going to bounce, I don't know, 10, 20 times, maybe, who knows. It might go down a hill. We don't exactly know where it's going to go. But we know when it ends, it's going to land on the right side so it can open up properly. We don't know how that's going to happen, but that's going to go. And then eventually, that beach ball is we're going to open it up, and the rover is going to drive off and be happy. Right. So that was about the stunned silence that happened at that time. But in fact, that was what happened. And it was the last idea anybody wanted, but every other idea didn't work. And sometimes in an entrepreneur, you realize when all the sanity doesn't work, it's the insane thing, it's the crazy thing that actually winds up working. And it worked twice, and it worked perfectly. But in concept, when you're pitching that, when you guys go out for your first business plan and you start doing something you've never done before, think about that. It is okay to be crazy, because sometimes that's the only way to get something done that's never been done before. This is the new version of the rover called Curiosity. It's about the size of a Mini Cooper and it doesn't have any solar panels. It was actually powered by nuclear power. That's what it looked like. And I said be curious because it's really pretty fascinating what this thing is out there doing. We just got signed on to do the News Mars rover. It's called 2020. Our job in this was to lower this vehicle to the surface. We did a bunch of other things. But the 7 minutes of terror, we were the last minute of the 7 minutes of terror. And that is not a good place to be when you realize that this mission has been going on for 4 or 5 years. It took a year to get there. Everybody in the world's looking at you. You're sitting in Pasadena. It's being broadcast all over the world. And somebody turns to you and says, you know that last thing, that last minute, it better work. It did. And what I developed a huge fascination with it. This is one of the first high-definition pictures from the surface of Mars. It's pretty amazing. From the place that we started 10 or 12 years ago, we can barely get an image to. We get an image that looks like it's done outside in our backyard. It's pretty amazing. What you're seeing here is the drill bit that's on the front that needed to be designed to drill in all sorts of surfaces. And that's pretty fun. But why did I put this up here? I put this up here because everything we do, if you think about out of the box, what else can you do with something like this? It's not just to go to Mars to drill holes. It has a lot of different things. For example, we had new alloys that are being used somewhere else. The drilling industry is now using this. It's got a whole variety of uses, as you can see here. But most importantly, and I think to me, the thing that makes a huge difference, if you think about it, we're using that technology to do prosthetics for people who've lost arms and limbs. Taking stuff, and if you think about picking up a pin or drilling a hole 340 million miles away on the 6th degree of freedom arm, you take all that technology, what else can you do with it? Well, my hand needs to do that same thing. If I don't have an arm, and I can use that technology to make people's lives better, isn't that what space is about? Think about things from out of the box, and it really, really makes a difference. We were fortunate enough to do the first, one of the very first small satellites called ChipSat. It was the first satellite you could control from your internet, from your laptop, which was pretty amazing. I could sit in my office and type in and the satellite would move. That was now a little over 12 years ago, 13 years ago. And from that day to now, you've all seen what happened in the satellite industry. It's been amazing. We've been fortunate enough to be at the forefront of all that. These are 11 satellites that were built in our assembly line. They were launched last December on the return mission for SpaceX. But that satellite, in little less than 10 years, we went from barely having a small satellite to having to be able to put up dozens of these things at the same time and be able to push them and make them work. It's a really fascinating journey. There we go. Some people are having fun. This is a picture from Albuquerque, from the Balloon Festival in Albuquerque, and I put it up there. If you've never been there, it's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing to see. But when you look at the sky, you see all sorts of balloons, and then all of a sudden you see a few things that don't quite fit in sometimes. And these are actual balloons from Star Wars, and they're huge. But the point of the story here is that you're going to get lots of ideas. The really hardest thing that I have to do is learn how to say no, because you can't do it all. You have to be able to figure out what it is that in your world, in your life, really makes a difference and sort through all that and find really cool balloons amongst all the ones that are out there. Because the tendency, and I do this all the time, I want to do it all. I want to be able to get everything done. I want to be able to be the person that finishes everything that I look at. But the truth is, it doesn't work like that. You have to be able to look at things and really make some pretty hard decisions along the way. These are pictures you've probably never seen, and it's one of my favorite because it actually affects this particular group a lot. The man and a woman on the left is Alexander Graham Bell and his wife Mabel. Bell had a huge career, telephone, telegraph, all sorts of things. But you don't know, he's actually one of the fathers of the aerospace industry. And in fact, is the predecessor of this conference. And it's really sort of an interesting story. His wife, Mabel, was his partner in life for years and years. He invented the telephone because she was deaf. And he fell in love with her. He was a teacher, she was a student, she was deaf, and he tried to figure out how to communicate with her. So he invented the telephone. It's things we do every day, right? You want to get something done, let's go just invent the telephone. He's a brilliant man. All her life, though, she was the one who said to him as his partner, I think you should go look at this. I think you should go look at this. In their last years, when they should have been long retired, she said, you know this thing about airplanes, Alexander, it's something you ought to go look at. And he did. And he put his mind on it. And he actually, with the Wright brothers, in my view, he actually moved aviation further than the Wright brothers did. He figured out one key really important thing about flying is that sometimes you have to turn an airplane. It's a true story. The Wrights did a great thing, but their plane was done by something called wing morph. It basically went to one direction. It was really hard to turn. He came to them and said, I saw this idea. I want to be able to do it. And it's called flaps and ailerons and rudders. hinging the surfaces. They didn't like it. They told him to go away. He did it on his own. And now every airplane that's ever been since then uses his concepts and idea. But the other thing he did was his wife said to him, you know, we need to create an incentive to get young people into the industry to do something different. They created the first X Prize in 1907. She put, at that time, $100,000, which was a lot of money back then, that she had taken basically out of his pants pockets over years, and said, we're going to invest this in prizes to get people in the aviation industry, which wasn't even born yet, go out and do things that were new. And he created the first aerospace association called the AEA, which had 5 members who are sitting in that picture, one of them being Glenn Curtiss, who went on to do Curtiss-Wright and a bunch of other things. But he went out and said, you can't do this alone. It's a team. It's a partnership. The people in your life, the people that you care about, are the ones that are going to help you through all this. This is one of my other favorite pictures. It's Walt Disney. And many of you probably don't know, Walt Disney was one of the first spokespeople for NASA. And he fell in love with space. He really wanted to go do something that was important. And he took all his mindset, and people at that time were really brilliant. They said, let's go outside to somebody who actually knows how to communicate. And probably at that time in the 50s, there wasn't anybody better than Walt Disney who was learning how to communicate through this new medium of television. And they brought him on board to help them figure out how to promote the Mercury program. And he did, and he fell in love with space. And this is why he put down in his charter when he started Disney that a quarter of everything he did had to be about the future. That's why we have Space Mountain. That's why we have Tomorrowland and Futureland, because he makes it a mandate in his world that we want to look to the future. And he fell in love with rockets. He even put Mickey Mouse on the moon, if you ever saw any of those old clips. It was a really fun thing. But the point of the story is go outside, find people who know what they're doing, and trust them, because we don't know it all as much as we think we do. You know, we're here in Seattle. This is, I think, one of my favorite pictures of the Ferris wheel downtown here in Seattle. And you realize, the point of that, it's a great thing, and you really like doing this kind of thing, going on Ferris wheels. But the point is, in this industry, it's really small. The wheel goes around. Sometimes people on top find themselves on the bottom. Sometimes people on the bottom come back to the top. And you realize once you're in the industry, it's pretty infectious. You stay in it for a long time. So be kind to the people around you. Things fail. People make mistakes. Things go wrong. But it's really important to realize that these wheels come around, and if you stay part of the community and understand what you're doing, you're going to build a lot of base, you're going to build a lot of people around you, and someday you're going to need it, because if you stay in it long enough, we all fail. We all have down times. We all have moments where it's not any good. And it's really important to be able to come back from that. One of my other favorite pictures from space, Disney couldn't script this any better, flying Apollo around the moon. It's Christmas Eve, flying to the backside of the moon. Somebody has a camera, the astronaut puts it out the window, looks out and takes a picture, first picture done by human of the Earth rising over the moon. And an amazing picture. It's pretty common now, we all look at it, but at the time it was taken, it had never been done before. No one had ever seen Earth in that way, taken by a human before. And it changed the world. Today's modern movement on the environmental issues and the ecology movement really traced their days back to this photo, where people began realizing everything you've ever known, everyone you've ever known, is on this little blue dot that's sitting up there in that picture. And we need to take care of it. That one photo began the whole thought process, in my view, of we need to go back and make sure we take care of our world. This is a picture from NASA Langley, and it's an old building falling down, and it's an old hangar. This is where Dreamchaser was born for me, now 11 years ago. And it was a story that we started that we wanted to, this was long before there was a commercial space program. We decided that someday the space shuttle was going to go away, and we needed to find a way to maybe build a new one. But would we build it the same way we can do it? The problem with that was we were a company of about 30 people at the time. And everybody in the world said, you've got to be out of your mind. You want to go build a space shuttle in a garage in Poway, California? But we thought it was a really good idea, maybe pretty audacious, but it was an interesting idea. So we looked around, and we found out there was several old NASA programs that had been tested for many years, 10 years in one case, and put away in this hangar under a tarp, and on top of the tarp was about 8 years worth of bird crap. And nobody cared about this thing. Nobody cared about the program. We went to this brick building. They sent a few people in to talk to me, like, who is this kid? Why do we want to talk to him? It's a pain in the ass. And what we found was this model of something they had designed called the HL-20. put 10 years worth of work, almost, I don't know, $500 or $600 million of research to figure out what's the best shape for a small space shuttle. And for a lot of reasons, they decided not to do it. So we went in and took it over and said, we want to go do it. And they looked at us and said, you got to be crazy, but it's part of NASA's job is to license technology, so here it is. Good luck. Bye. Don't come back. And the point of that whole story is, as audacious as it sounded 11 years ago, it's now a reality. But it all began with one step. And sometimes when you do something, you're going to see it seems like this huge mountain. You can never get there. And you need to think about it as one step. And this is obviously one of the most famous one steps that you've ever seen, is the first step on the moon. And I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of people who signed on to this crazy idea early on, including many of the old NASA veterans, Neil Armstrong being one of those. And one of the things I realized is how valuable all that information is. And you also realize how you can, when you do a lot of speaking, how you can be misinterpreted. So the press out there, be kind to me today. Neil went up to the moon, and you imagine if you're the first person walking on the moon, you sort of practice your first words, right? You weren't going to just wing it and say what I'm going to say. So he practiced them really well. The problem was communication in 1969 wasn't really good. So he made a statement, was on the moon. You know, they're busy trying to stay alive. They weren't really worried about what was happening at home. It got broadcast home, and it went global. I mean, before there was a social media network or the internet, it was all over the world instantly, long before they got home. The problem was it came back wrong. It was a glitch at the absolute worst time, because he didn't say one step, small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. He didn't actually say that. If you think about it, it's a redundant statement. Why would the person who's chosen to be first person on the moon, who's the most precise person in the astronaut corps, who practices for a month, screw up a statement and make it redundant in bad English? Not going to happen. He actually said one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind, and in probably the world's worst communication glitch, the A got zapped out somewhere along the way. Came back, got printed everywhere over the world, and for the rest of his life, he tried to get it changed. And NASA did. So the point of this is, as you go through, you realize that mistakes like this can be global, but it didn't matter. It didn't matter to anyone. What mattered is what he did. But he kept talking about the idea that, you know, precision is a good thing. Being able to deal with this stuff is a good thing. And for me, that means respecting the past. It's one of my favorite pictures we did. This is actually to scale. It's big brother and little brother for me. And it's really a fun thing to think about, that we are sort of carrying on this tradition of 35 years of successful shuttle flights and being able to take all that energy, all that knowledge and move it on. But nothing we do in this industry, almost nothing. Maybe there's one or two cases where something brand new. It's built on everything else that we've ever done. And we've been able to take that idea, that little crazy idea from a long time ago, and turn it into something that actually works and flies and has the ability to really carry on the torch in the same way that it was before. And, you know, the mantle of being an entrepreneur is that you inherently will fail. You will break down. You'll have really bad nights. You will have times where you want to kill a lot of people. It will not always be a wonderful thing. Then you go to sleep and you wake up and you have amnesia. It's an inherent task of any entrepreneur. You have to be able to have instantaneous Alzheimer's and amnesia. The amnesia tells you it wasn't really bad yesterday, and the Alzheimer's says, I'm going to go do it again and seem like it's a brand new thing. And it's quite an effective tool if you can bring it out when you need to. We're fortunate enough to, after 11 years, have gone through and win a long-standing competition, and it's now a wonderful place to be building the next generation space shuttle. But there was 11 years of pretty bad failures, or 11 years of pretty dark moments. Things fell apart. Things didn't work. Everybody in the world told me we were crazy. We should never, ever do it again. And what I realized is that in those moments, the only thing you really have is the faith in yourself, that you really believe that something's right. And you have to take it to a moment where you know you can't do it and there's nothing else to do. And that's the really hard part. It's in athletics. You see the really best athletes in the Olympics that are coming up here. There may be a half a second difference in a race. It's that half a second that wins them the gold medal. They stay on it for as long as possible. And we were able to do that. And 2 years ago, we lost, as many of you know, we lost the crew competition. It was a devastating loss for us. Lots of people went away. We had to lay off people. It was really hard. People said, okay, you've tried it. You got really far. You built a prototype. It's the end of the road. Time to go home. Time to hang it up. The 90 people who were left on this program with me said, we're not ready. We're not ready to hang it up. We want to try again. And no one in the world at that time said, you just lost this big competition with NASA. You want to go back in a new competition to the same people, to the same decision makers with the same vehicle, and say, we want to do it again. I mean, if that's not insanity, what is? But you know, you can change the endings to things if you work really hard. And I want to show you how that's possible. How many of you have seen The Martian? Yeah, I figured that would be a good thing. The Martian has been re-released with a new ending. I don't know if you know that or not. But take a look as Matt looks out the window here.
I think about the sheer number of people who pulled together to save my sorry ass, and I can barely comprehend it. The cost of my survival was in the hundreds of millions of dollars, all to save a botanist with anti-authority issues. Why bother? Sure, part of it might be what I represent. Progress, science, the interplanetary future we've dreamed about for centuries. But really, they save me because that's what we do. Every human being has a basic instinct to help each other out. If a hiker gets lost in the mountains, people coordinate a search. If an earthquake levels the city, people all over the world send emergency supplies. This instinct is found in every culture without exception. And because of it, I had an entire planet on my side.
The new ending of The Martian. Which is true, actually. We didn't do this. They did come to us and said we wanted to use your vehicle in the movie. They needed to get it out for the Oscars, some small thing like that. And they couldn't get it done in time, so the producer and the director came back and said, could we cut a new ending using your vehicle in it? Endings can change, and that's the message here. And his speech, which I think applies to any entrepreneur, is that I am so amazed by how many people pulled my sorry ass out of the fire over the years and came to help me, that it really is something that makes a huge difference. And one of my favorite sayings I've been using for years is something done by Gandhi, who was not an entrepreneur in the traditional sense, but changed his world as entrepreneurs do. And when you go home, and if you're ever going to start a company up, if you learn any one thing from me, this is it. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they try to fight you, and then you win. That is the story of any entrepreneur in any industry. When a company like Microsoft got started, when Apple got started, when Amazon got started, anything you do, they'll sit there and they'll say, laugh at you, it'll never happen. Then they'll say, oh, these guys aren't worth it. We'll just keep them on the side. IBM said, Microsoft will never get anywhere. It's this whole software thing. Who gives a crap about any of that? And yeah, that's exactly what they said. And then they will wake up a little bit late and they said, well, maybe we should get into the game. Ask Kodak about that one. You know, maybe we should get in the game and do this differently. Then you realize at the end of the day, you can win on something like this. And I'm here because the future is education. The future is the next generation in any industry, but particularly in ours. It's a multi-generational industry, and it really matters. And when you guys get to be on this side of the table talking, remember this, because there's going to be another group of young people out there who are going to say, I want to do something like he's doing or she's doing. And it's time to pay it back a little bit, and it's really important to make that happen. And stop for a moment. This is a photo John Glenn asked me to give him. It was highest honor I think I've ever had. He asked me to present the award of the 50th anniversary of his first space flight. And we spent time together. He asked me to be the person to give it to him and to talk about him in his life. And the time I spent with him before that, and as well, he didn't want to talk about anything he did in his life or his career. He wanted to know what I was doing. He wanted to know where we were going, and he wanted to know if he can come on fly on Dream Chaser. He was lobbying me. I mean, John Glenn lobbying me to go fly on my spaceship. Yeah, I know, it's pretty amazing. But there are amazing moments in this industry, and you really need to take hold of them and remember them. Crazy stuff that happens, we were one of the sponsors of the rollout of Star Wars this year. And it was done through a big event in Los Angeles. And to think about us being part of that at some point in time was an amazing story for me and my team. But have a little fun with it. You see my two program managers playing with their lightsabers in front of Dream Chaser. It's okay to have fun, too. This is what it's about. It's a good thing to do. And as a young child, I always dreamed of flying and going in space. And we have those little dreams of being a young person. And it's so important to keep that little child going on in your heart. Sometimes you have to do temper tantrums and you have to go and yell and scream, but most of it is just believing in the unbelievable and to really look at it. And I like to say dreams don't have an expiration date. If you don't get there now, you might get there someday. And I wanted to thank you all for listening, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Hi, Mark. Hi. I'm Alan Boyle with GeekWire. And I wanted to know what the next chapter
Alan,
of this...
by the way, is one of the best industry writers in this industry.
Thank you.
He's been around a long time. Thank you, Alan, for what you do.
So I wanted to, now that you've buttered me up, I wanted to know...
The lesson of being an entrepreneur doesn't end when I start my talk, by the way. Go ahead, Alan.
The next chapter of the Dream Chaser story, what lies ahead? When are you going to be doing testing? And
sure.
Are you going to take a ride?
Yeah, I'm going to take a ride. I have a seat for one reporter to come along with us.
Oh, okay.
That's really buttering them up. But we are, it's a really great time. Our test vehicle, our version of the Shuttle Enterprise, is about to be finished for its next phase of flight test, and somewhere in the August timeframe, it's going to be shipped off to California, to the Armstrong Center, and to Edwards to begin phase 2 of flight testing, which is going to be really fun and exciting. We're testing a lot of this stuff for the orbital vehicle now, and we don't know how many tests we're going to do, but as many as we need to do. So that's happening. While that's happening, the actual orbital vehicles itself are under construction. We have built the first structures for vehicle number 2, and they've been delivered to Colorado to start getting outfitted. So that's a fun thing. As you know, we won the cargo contract. That cargo contract is now well underway. We just finished the first milestone of that, and we are looking to be launching on time, which is about 3 years from now, the second half of 2019, which is NASA, whatever NASA's schedule is. But that's a really amazing, fun thing for us to be able to do, and that contract will go well into the next decade. So we need lots of help. We're going to be hiring lots of people, and you guys want to come out, work on the next space shuttle. I think it's a pretty good time to do that. So it's testing, it's building the next vehicle, and it's getting all the material and work done necessary to get the vehicle flying from a logistical and software and other points of view. All that's going on.
Just a quick follow-up. Has there been any discussion about how many flights, what the balance of cargo flights is going to be, or is it too early for that?
It's too early. We actually got started and the contract is moving, and somewhere between now and the end of the year, NASA will be making a decision on manifest and how many flights. And there's a minimum of 6, but it's probably going to be a lot more than that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks.
Hi, Mark. Great presentation. I'm Sean McClinton from Space Entrepreneurs here in Seattle. We've got a network of about 550.
Did I do it right?
What's that?
Did I get it right? Space Entrepreneurs?
Just beginning right. One of the challenges we see is people with ideas, people with small businesses, trying to understand what, say, you guys need at Sierra Nevada and what you're looking for and how, because we can form teams pretty quickly, but how do we figure out what you guys need and how do we connect? How does an aspiring entrepreneur, a student or young professional, how do they learn? What do you suggest in terms of corporations of what you guys need and how to fill those needs that maybe a traditional team in your company can't fill? Yeah,
that's a great question. And I think there are 2 different models of how to go about doing this. There are certain models that say we're going to do everything in-house, we're going to build everything in-house, we're not going to go outside. We went a different road. We said we're going to do everything that we can do well, but if somebody does it better than us, we're going to bring them on board. And if nobody does it right now, we're going to help find somebody to figure out how to build it. And about 60% of our program is actually outsourced to 30 different companies, 9 universities in a number of different countries. The idea is to bring the best of the best to the table. It's harder to manage, but it's a better way to do it. So to answer your question, in that there are technologies that have not yet been created or need to be advanced or need to be developed. And the best way for us to be able to do that is that's what we're using a lot of universities to do, to help us do the primary research to figure out what's the next step in thermal protection or what's the next step that we need to do in composites. And I think we can certainly pass that information on, but there's a list of technologies that are not yet mature not only in the vehicle itself, but what goes inside. I think that's the most underrated part of this. Everybody looks at the shiny vehicle. It's just the transportation system. It's what you do with it that matters. This is a laboratory. This is a satellite servicing vehicle. It brings cargo up. It can do many other things. But all those things of robotics and how you manipulate, how do you have a satellite to go fix it? How do you set up workstations to do experiments inside a vehicle like Dream Chaser? I think that's really where the interesting opportunity is, because it's smaller, it's more accessible, and what experiments we actually do while we're going to space or when we're in space is probably a pretty good area as well. Right. So we come up and we can share that with you with the areas that we think we're going to move into that we believe are the most interesting, the most dynamic, but yet the least mature, if you will, which I think is where the entrepreneur side comes in.
Thank you.
Of course.
Hi, my name is Blaze. I'm CTO at SpaceVR. Almost forgot my lightsaber, so I had to go back and get it.
You're not going to hit me with that, are you?
No, not if you're nice. So, no, I'm kidding. So what kind of cameras are you putting on Dream Chaser to tell the story of what you guys are doing? And would you be interested in putting a 360 camera to really immerse people into the story?
Yeah, probably, yeah. But the idea is that the way we view this is it's not our vehicle. I mean, we own it. But it's about, we think this vehicle can create a lot of excitement around the world. One of the reasons is we can come home and fly and land anywhere in the world. We need about the same runway as a 737. And we have nothing hazardous material, there's no hazardous material on board. So we actually can come and land at various airports, and a number of them are actually in the process of getting certified for us to do that. Not by emergency, which is the past, but by intent. So for example, we could come up to Seattle and land at Boeing Field or SeaTac. And doing that, then bring the community here, particularly the young community, and come and see the space program. What I found out is about 1/2 of 1% of the people in this country have ever seen the space program, even in a museum. And could you imagine if we could bring the space program out to the people to be able to do that? How many young people would then get inspired maybe to take my job over, but maybe go out and find a cure for cancer or go develop the next technology? It's about inspiration. And I think from what we're trying to do is to be able to do that. And in part, to do that, you need to tell the story. And it's our view that we want to document the whole story, make sure that it's told from as many different angles as possible, and to instrument the vehicle. We'll already have a pretty substantial group of videos on it because it's an autonomous vehicle. This version of it is fully autonomous, so it has to be able to understand where it is everywhere. But I think the answer is we will have a pretty serious amount of cameras on it, and that might be one. We haven't spec'd it yet, but it certainly can be.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. Fly on, and my grandfather taught me to fly, and he was a pilot from that era, and he really instilled the art of flying into me. So there's a technical part, you have to learn how to fly, but you've got to love to fly. And the way he did it was pretty interesting. He wouldn't let me look at any of the instruments. He said you should feel the flying, you should feel the plane, you should feel the speed, you should feel the wind, you should feel the things around you, because that's going to be what it is to fly, to learn how to fly. And I remember that, and I use that today, and it's something, you can learn all the technical, you can learn all the school, but a lot of what you do is an art. A lot of what we do is an art. I would probably say about 1/3 of the work that we do in our company is creative. It's never been done before, and that's what art is, isn't it? You're creating something that's never been done. And this is a fairly famous picture. Most of you guys probably have never seen it. The woman in the back is Eleanor Roosevelt. The man in the front is the gentleman who's responsible for creating effectively what became the Tuskegee Airmen. And during World War II, the military was not integrated. There was not a lot of opportunities for African-American pilots or of any type. Eleanor Roosevelt decided she was going to take this on, and she did it in a really fabulous way. She went to her husband, who happened to be the president. He said, Franklin, I want you to change this. And he said he would do it. He said he'd do it like most husbands. He never got around to doing it. So she decided to take it on her own hands. So she got lost. And you can imagine the First Lady getting lost. She went out and found this pilot, and said to him, we're going to make a statement. He said, you're going to fly me to my press conference. And for the first time, she got in the back of the biplane. This is a plane that she's sitting in. He flew into the press conference, making a statement that then led to a change, a really big change. And the change was, she said to herself, I can do something. A lot of people say, why not? Why not go off? Why not do this? Why not make a change? And she actually went off and did it. So she flew into the press conference, landed, And at that point in time, her picture was on every newspaper in the world, that she trusted herself to go do this with this man, and it changed that part of history and became what we now know as the Tuskegee Airmen. This is a really fun picture. I don't know if you've ever seen the New Horizons spacecraft, the Pluto spacecraft. This is what it looked like before it left. And the reason I put it up there is that the message here as an entrepreneur, these things don't happen overnight. As much as we like to get instant gratification, sometimes it takes a lot of patience. It isn't what most people think it is. It's a lot scarier. It's a lot crazier. Those of you in the audience who know about this know what it's like. But I wanted to go through and just talk a little bit about what the aspects of it. And I think where it comes from, I got the chance to meet a writer by the name of Isaac Asimov. You guys read any of his books? Yeah. You know, I don't know if you know, he wrote over 500 books in his life. Really, the whole robot series, he imagined what robots were going to be like, and as you know, it turned into a number of different movies. But he also wrote a lot of nonfiction books about what it was like to be in science. When I met him and talked to him, this is one of the things he said. I've never forgot it. I was just really young at the time, and he said, if I was in heaven, I want to do exactly what I'm doing right now. And to me, that's the essence of being an entrepreneur. No matter how crazy it gets, no matter how bad it is, you got to love what it is that you do and realize that if you could do anything else, you're doing what you really want to do. And it isn't, you know, we talk about aerospace and all the lectures here is about technical side and all the things we're able to do. And certainly I'm a technologist and I love it. But it's not so much about technology. It's really an art in many ways. And these pictures are actually where I grew up. That's a plane that I learned of satellites, as you've heard, to building components for big organizations, to creating our own rocket motors and environmental systems, and to now building the next generation space shuttle. And that's been a journey that's not only been mine, but a lot of good people in my organization and around my organization. I don't know if somebody can put the monitor here on. I got a blank screen on the monitor in front of me. Maybe it's because I'm not supposed to say anything. I don't know. We do 4 things in space. We were one of the first builders of small satellites and the next generation small satellites. We build components for virtually everybody in the industry that makes things go, from planetary missions to large satellites. We are now a rocket motor producer. We produce environmental systems that are really cutting-edge environmental systems. And as you know, many of you followed this story for a long time. We've taken the vehicle Dream Chaser and now get it to flight. Last year, we had a celebration of our time together, and we realized we've done a lot of fun things. We've gone throughout the solar system. We've been to as far away as Pluto and as close to the sun as you could possibly be, and visited 7 planets with something we did along the way, and that's a really pretty wonderful thing. But really what I wanted to talk to you today about is what it's like to be a space entrepreneur. This mission was conceived 16 years before it actually got to Pluto. And the people that were chosen at the time to go do that mission were chosen intentionally because they were the youngest people around who had enough skill to do that, because they wanted to be there for the entire flight of the mission. And it's pretty wonderful when you do that. You realize at the end of the day that it's really worth waiting for. You get to do something in this industry that few people ever get to experience. And when you go home and you say, when it gets really hard, you go home and you'd be able to say to yourself, you know, it's really interesting. I went to Pluto today. You know, you step back and say that, and how many people can actually say that when you go home? We've landed on Mars 12 times now, and went to Mars 12 times. And one of the neatest missions, I think, in doing that is to understand that you're able to change not only the world, but to do stuff no one has ever done before. And at the core of being an entrepreneur, I think that's what you're trying to do. One of my partners who's in the room, Tom Crabb, started an organization called Orbitech as an entrepreneur 28 years ago, and we're now, 26 years ago, I think, and we're now working together. And what they're doing now is, among many things, but one of the more interesting things, they're helping to grow food in space. The veggie experience that maybe some of you have